All right, good morning, everyone. We are here with another 26 League Heroes retail combo break, which includes the 26 League Heroes case as well as the 26 League Heroes starter case with the bonuses. The bonuses are the 26 League Heroes hobby box as well as the 26 sticker album and box combo. The bonuses are randomised at the end of the break between all 17 teams. And for the first time this break, we are going to split it up into two parts. Part one being this one, and we will do our retail case first, so to get the 12 boxes done and dusted. Then I'm going to have a half an hour break and come back with part two, which will include the starter pack case as well as the randomizer for the bonuses. We will show all the big hits, so the gold triumph, instant win, and any of that sort of stuff that comes out of the case. We will show that at the end of part one and basically start fresh with the starter case for part two. So yeah. All right, team list for this one. Broncos, Jason Biegemann. Raiders, Craig Milson. Bulldogs, Scott McBryde. Sharks, Johnathon Bowden. Dolphins, Warren Stoddart. Titans, Johnathon Bowden. Manly, Dean Mick. Storm, Nicholas Verwey. Knights, Oliver Kerr. Cowboys, Oliver Kerr. Eels, Shannon Lawrenson. Panthers, Johnathon Bowden. Rabbitohs, Nicholas Verwey. Dragons, Warren Stoddart. Roosters, Tyler Olsen. Warriors, Chris Hughes. Tigers, Julian Pye. All right, let's get into it. Here we are. Can't really see much at the moment. Here's our bonuses, which we will put away till the end of the break. And the album, which has the 5 packets in it as well. Alright, let's get the case open, get these boxes out and get into it. We are let's move these back out of the way a bit so we've got some room. Let's bring the chat up so we can see what's going on. G'day Jonathan, welcome to the break. Good luck today, buddy. And our team list is there. Box number 1. Let's do it. So everyone's in the Facebook group. I will put the link for part 2 in the post like I just did for this one. Game breakers, Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Tamika Upton for the Broncos. Die cuts, Nick Meaney for the Storm. Luminous, Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. Bang, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous, Damien Cook for the Dragons. League heads, Falago for Storm. Luminous, Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. League heads, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Adam Dewey for Tigers. Game breakers, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous, Dominic Young for the Knights. League heads, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous, Amoli Olika R2 for Manly. Gladiators, Jareem Bula for the Tigers, number 558. Luminous, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Red Triumph for the Dolphins. Luminous, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Bang, Xavier Coates for the Storm. Luminous, Milwaukee Fotowaika for Titans. League heads, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous, Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. Game breakers, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Luminous, Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. League heads, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Ben Chaboyevich for Manly. Game breakers, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous, Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Die cut, Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Jerome Hughes for Storm. League heads Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Casey McLean for Panthers. Game breakers Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Luminous Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Bang Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. Red Triumph Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous William Kennedy for the Sharks. League heads Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Luminous Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Game breakers Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Luminous Sean Russell for the Eels. League heads Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous Jonah Pezzett for Storm. League heads Samula Fainu for Tigers. Luminous Zali Hopkins for the Dragons. Bang Tommy Dearden for Cowboys. Luminous Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. League heads Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous Jermaine McEwen for Knights. Mercury Jordan Ricky for the Broncos, 356. Matthew Tomoko Luminous for the Raiders. Game breakers Samai Matorfa for the Raiders. Luminous James Tedesco for the Roosters. Die cuts Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Max Plath for Dolphins. League heads Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Game breakers, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Luminous, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. We have a Daly M Predictor. Luminous, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Die cut, Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Luminous, Saratoga Tukey for the Tigers. League heads, Big Tino for the Titans. Luminous, Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Bang Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous, Ethan Strange. Tom Starling even for the Raiders. Helps if I actually look at it properly. Alright, last packet for the first box. Bang. Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Alright, let's pack up the box and move on to the next one. Bang Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Trent LaRoe for Storm. League heads, Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous, Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Game breakers, Sophie Holloman for Raiders. Luminous, AJ Brimson for the Titans. League heads, Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous, Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Game breakers, Billy Walters for the Broncos. Luminous, Moses Leota for Panthers. Die cuts, Eliza Katoa for the Storm. Luminous, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. League heads, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous, Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. Mercury, Will Penasini for the Eels, number 291. Jaden Sewer, Luminous for the Dragons. Game breakers, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. League heads, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Bang, Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Luminous, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. League heads, Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Die cuts, Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous, Falago for Storm. Game breakers, Tyron Wishart for the Storm. Luminous, Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. Gladiators, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights, number 453. Luminous, Tamale for the Raiders. League heads, Jacob Little for the Dragons. Luminous, Emma Veron for the Sharks. Die cut, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous, Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Game breakers, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. League heads, Connolly Lumi Lou for the Dolphins. Luminous, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Game breakers, Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Luminous, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Bang, Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Luminous, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Red Triumph for the Dragons. Luminous, Dylan Walker for the Eels. League heads, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous Zahara Temera for the Raiders. Bang Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Brian Top for Panthers. Game Breakers Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Luke Lolili for the Tigers. Die Cut Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Luminous Murray Talagi for Cowboys. League heads Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Red Triumph Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Game Breakers Isaiah Yo for Panthers. Luminous Sean Kepe for the Rabbitohs. Kepi. Hope everyone's got their tips in and entry into the Pick the Score giveaway. League heads Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. And we're already halfway to our next member milestone giveaway in the Facebook group. We're getting through them pretty quick at the moment. Game Breakers Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Although I did remove one this morning, Nafor White for the Roosters. There was one that slipped through that shouldn't have. League heads Tom Starling for the Raiders. Luminous Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Bang Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Lindsay Smith for the Panthers. League heads Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Luminous Philip Semi for the Titans. Bang Chance Nico Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Alright, box number 2 done and dusted. Let's get into box number 3. There we go. Game breakers, Trent LaRoe for Storm. Luminous, Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. League heads, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Luminous, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Bang, Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Die cuts, Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. Luminous, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Luminous, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. Bang, Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous, Tiana Penatoni Gray for the Sharks. League heads, John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous, Terrell May for the Tigers. Mercury Sanua Taruva for the Tigers, number 155. Jack Williams, Luminous for the Eels. Upside down red Triumph, Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous, Stefano Utkamanu for Storm. Die cut, Marcelo Montoya for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Bang, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Game breakers, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Dylan Walker, Luminous for the Eels. League heads, Jareem Bula for the Tigers. Luminous, Zahara Temura for the Raiders. Game breakers, Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Luminous Brian To'o for Panthers. Die cuts, David Clemmer for the Dragons. Luminous Luke Lilly for the Tigers. League heads, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Luca Moretti for the Eels. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Bang Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. League heads, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Tui Kamikamika for Storm. Red Triumph, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Luminous Jake Trebojevic for Manly. League heads, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. How good is that? They're going ahead with Jai July. Sean Kepe for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Alex Twal for the Tigers. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Gladiators, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys, number 461. Luminous Falago for Storm. League heads, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, White for the Roosters. Luminous Tamale for the Raiders. League heads, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Emma Veron for the Sharks. Game breakers, Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Die cut, Trent Leroux for Storm. Luminous, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Game Breakers, Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Luminous, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous, Philip Semi for Titans. Bang, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. League Heads, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Die cut, Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous, White for the Roosters. League Heads, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Bang, Alifiana Campiera for Titans. Luminous, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. And that's box number 3 done and dusted. League Heads, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Luminous, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Game Breakers, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Cassie Hiku for the Eels. Bang, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Marky Mark for the Roosters. League Heads, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous, Keanu Kinney for the Titans. League Heads, Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Luminous, Tom Gilbert for Dolphins. Gladiators, Xavier Coates for Storm. Number 326. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. Game Breakers, Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Luminous Latu Fainu for Tigers. Die Cuts Alifiana Kamki Era for Titans. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for Dragons. Game Breakers Jesse Colhoun for the Sharks. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. League Heads Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Game Breakers Nathan Cleary for the Panthers. Luminous Tom Dearden for the Cowboys. Bang Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Triumph Alifiana Campiera for Titans. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. Game Breakers Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Die Cut Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Dylan Edwards League Heads for Panthers. Luminous Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Game Breakers Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Dally M Rookie. Luminous Whenua Pole for the Tigers. Bang Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Game breakers, Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous, Trent Leroux for Storm. League heads, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous, Jamal Fogarty for Manly. League heads, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous, Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous, AJ Brimson for Titans. League heads, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous, Murata Nakor for the Warriors. Bang, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Moses Leota for Panthers. Game breakers, Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Luminous, Billy Walters for the Broncos. League heads, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Die cuts, Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous, Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. Bang, Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous, Joseph Tarpanay for Raiders. Game breakers, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Triumph for the Panthers. Luminous, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. League heads, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous, Greg Marsu for the Knights. League heads, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Bang, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. League heads Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Hugo Savala for the Roosters. And last packet, box number 4. Mercury Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Number 224. Along with Nathan Cleary, Luminous for the Panthers. Game breakers Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Sam Verrills for the Titans. Game breakers Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous KO Weeks for the Raiders. League heads Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Bradman Best for the Knights. Game breakers Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Junior Paulo for the Eels. Bang Joash for the Eels. Luminous Felice Kafusi for the Dolphins. League heads Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Get open. Gladiators Sam Walker for the Roosters. Number 554. Luminous Beau Fermor for the Titans. Red Triumph for the Roosters. Luminous Lachlan Elias for the Dragons. Game breakers Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Billy Smith for the Roosters. League heads, Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous, Max King for the Bulldogs. Die cuts, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Luminous, Lyshan Albert Jones for the Warriors. Bang, Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous, Reece Walsh for Broncos. League heads, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous, Toltor Koala for Manly. League heads, Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous, Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. League heads, Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Jeremy Marshall King for the Dolphins. Luminous, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Game breakers, Tegan Demick for the Bulldogs. Phoenix Crossland, Luminous for the Knights. Bang, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Luminous, Alex Twal for the Tigers. League heads, Alex Twal for the Tigers. Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Mercury, Ali Latua for the Warriors, number 295. Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous, Ethan Bullimore for Manly. League heads, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Jesse Colhoun for the Sharks. Game breakers, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous, Tyron Wishart for Storm. Sanua Turuva, bang for the Tigers. Luminous Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Lakeheads, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Die-Cut, Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. Luminous Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Die-Cut, Renato Molitalo for the Sharks. Luminous Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Game Breakers, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Triumph, Chance Nico Clockstead for the Warriors. Luminous Xavier Coates for Storm. League Heads, Stefano Utikamanu for Storm. Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Bang Tamale for the Raiders. Luminous Dylan Egan for the Dragons. League Heads, Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Braden Trindle for the Sharks. League Heads, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Abby Church for the Eels. Instant win. Luminous Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Bang Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. Luminous Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Alright, that one's done and dusted. Let's get on to the next one. Mercury, Renato Mulatalo for the Sharks, number 64. Keezy Apps, Luminous for the Tigers. Game Breakers, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers, Anessa Biddle for the Sharks. Luminous, Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Luminous, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Bang, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Game Breakers, Abby Church for the Eels. Luminous, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. League Heads, Jake Trebojevic for Manly. Luminous, Isaac Tago for Panthers. League Heads, Reece Walsh for Broncos. Luminous, Sean Russell for the Eels. Die cut, Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Luminous, Zali Hopkins for the Dragons. Die cut, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous, Alefiana Kampi-Era for Titans. Bang, Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous, Addo Carr for the Eels. League Heads, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luminous, Robert Toya for the Roosters. League Heads, Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Luminous, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous, Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. Game Breakers, Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. Gladiators, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors, number 137. Luminous Tamir Martin for the Warriors. League heads, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Bang, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous William Kennedy for the Sharks. Bang, Whenua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous James Tedesco for the Roosters. Die cuts Tamale for Raiders. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. Bang, Tyron Wishart for Storm. Luminous Damien Cook for the Dragons. League heads, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous Adam Dewey for the Tigers. League heads, Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Max Plath for Dolphins. Game breakers, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Hamoli Olaka-Atu for Manly. Luminous Hamoli Olaka-Atu for Manly. League heads, Dylan Walker for the Eels. Luminous Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Dally M Predictor Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Mawaki Fotuaika for the Titans. Bang Jalen de Groot for Titans. Luminous Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. League Heads, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. League Heads, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Triumph Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous Jerome Hughes for Storm. Game Breakers, Zach Labert for the Cowboys. Luminous Casey McLean for Panthers. League Heads, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Luminous Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Red Triumph Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Game Breakers, Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Alright, next box coming up. Let's go. We have an Origin Predictor. League Heads, Kirk Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. Robert Toya die cut for the Roosters. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. League Heads Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous Big Tino for the Titans. Bang Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Luminous Cal Hero for the Sharks. Game Breakers Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. League Heads Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Ezra Mam Triumph for Broncos. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. League Heads Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Game Breakers Big Tino for the Titans. Jacob Preston Luminous for the Bulldogs. Bang Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. League Heads Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Get open. Bang James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Nico Hines for the Sharks. Game Breakers Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Leheopawate for Manly. League Heads Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Mercury Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders, number 230. Luminous Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Die cuts Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Helps if we'll put it in the right one. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. League heads KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Nelson Asofa Solomona for Storm. Bang Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous James Fisher Harris for the Warriors. Game Breakers Tamale for the Raiders. Alex Johnston Luminous for the Rabbitohs. League heads Brian Top for Panthers. Flying Kikau Luminous for the Bulldogs. Adam Reynolds banging for the Broncos. Luminous Apsai Coruscant for the Tigers. League heads Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. Die cut Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Brian Kelly die cut for Titans. Luminous Isaiah Yo for Panthers. Red Triumph for the Dolphins. Luminous Dylan Brown for the Knights. Game Breakers Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Luminous Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Bang Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous Ben Hunt for the Broncos. League heads Sam Verrills for Titans. Luminous Sayongi for the Eels. Game Breakers, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. League Heads, Isaiah Yo for Panthers. Luminous Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Julia Robinson for the Broncos. Luminous Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Matt Burton, Gladiators for the Bulldogs. Number 2. Nice low one there. Jerome Luai, Luminous for the Tigers. League Heads, Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Luminous Hudson Young for the Raiders. Game Breakers, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous Lekahela Sema for the Warriors. Die Cuts, Peter for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. Game Breakers, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. Another box down. Red Triumph for the Titans. Luminous Gutho for the Dragons. League Heads, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Luminous Lachlan Ilias for Dragons. League Heads, Val Holmes for Dragons. Luminous Ben Hunt for Broncos. Bang Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Billy Smith for Roosters. Game breakers. Kuli Kefu for Dolphins. Luminous Max King for the Bulldogs. League Heads Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous Lyson Albert Jones for the Warriors. Die cuts Ben Trebojevic for Manly. Luminous Reese Walsh for Broncos. Game breakers Anfanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous Sayongi for the Eels. Die cuts Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Luminous Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous Tolato Koala for Manly. Red Triumph Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Dylan Edwards for Panthers. League Heads Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Luminous Payne Haas for the Broncos. Game breakers Mahalia Murphy for the Eels. Luminous Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Red Triumph League Heads. Valami kick out for the Bulldogs. Luminous Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Bang Falago for Storm. Luminous Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. League Heads Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Die cuts Max Plath for Dolphins. Luminous Jaden Campbell for Titans. Game breakers Valami kick out for the Bulldogs. Luminous Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Gladiators, John Bateman for the Cowboys, number 286. Luminous, Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Alifiana Kamkiera for Titans. Luminous, Kurt Capewell for the Warriors. Bang, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous, Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Mercury, Isaac Tago for Panthers, number 222. Luminous, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. League Heads, Moses Leota for Panthers. Luminous, Dream Buller for Tigers. League Heads, Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. Luminous, Hudson Young for the Raiders. Game Breakers, Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Luminous, Xavier Coates for Storm. League Heads, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Die Cuts, Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Luminous, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Game Breakers, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Luminous, Abby Church for the Eels. And a gold triumph. Lekahela Sema for the Warriors. League Heads, Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Bang, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous, Isaiah Yo for Panthers. Game Breakers, Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Luminous, Hammer for the Dolphins. Game Breakers, Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous, Dylan Brown for the Knights. Bang, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Ethan Bullymore for Manly. League Heads, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous, Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Another box down. Let's move these along. Game Breakers, Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Luminous, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Game Breakers, Bo Fermor for Titans. Luminous, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. League Heads, Lehe Hopawate for, number 9 for Manly. Luminous, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous, Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Bang, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. League Heads, Milwaukee Fodawaka for the Titans. Luminous, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Bang, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Luminous, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. League Heads, Greg Marsu for the Knights. Luminous, Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Die cuts, Sean Russell for the Eels. Luminous, Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Red Triumph, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Alifiana Campiera for Titans. Game Breakers, Joash for Eels. Luminous, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Bang, Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. League Heads, Joash for the Eels. Luminous, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Die cuts for White for the Roosters. Luminous, Apsai Coruscant for the Tigers. League Heads, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Luminous, Addo Kerr for the Eels. Game Breakers, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous, Liam Martin for the Panthers. Mercury, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs, number 301. Luminous, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. League Heads, Keon Colin-Matangi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Luca Moretti for the Eels. Game Breakers, Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Luminous, Robert Sawyer for the Roosters. Game Breakers, Isaiah Katoa for the Dolphins. Luminous, James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Bang Lekahalasima for the Warriors. Luminous, Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. League Heads, Marky Mark for Roosters. Luminous, Val Holmes for the Dragons. Die cut, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Big Tino for Titans. Game breakers, Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Luminous Kale Iro for the Sharks. Bang Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. League heads, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. Die cuts, Alex Seafarth for the Tigers. Luminous Tamir Martin for the Warriors. League heads, Apasai Coruscant for Tigers. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. Red Triumph Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Die cuts, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Game breakers, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. League heads, Tom Starling for Raiders. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. League heads, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Bang Asaya Yongi for the Eels. Luminous Keezy Apps for Tigers. Gladiators, Jerome Hughes for Storm, number 227. Luminous Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. And last one for the box. League heads, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Oops, sorry. Alright, get rid of these and get into the next one. Game breakers, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Red Triumph for Rabbitohs, Latrell Mitchell. Luminous, Loco Pacifici Tonga for the Dragons. League heads, Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous, Luke Brooks for Manly. Game breakers, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. Mercury, Jake Trebojevic for Manly, number 45. Luminous, Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Bang, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous, Georgia Hale for the Titans. League heads, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous, Josh Kerr for Dragons. League heads, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Billy Walters for the Broncos. Bang, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Gladiators, Luke Brooks for Manly, number 64. Luminous, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Game breakers, Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Luminous, Mitch Kenny for the Panthers. Bang, Katoni Staggs for Broncos. Luminous and Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Game breakers, Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous, Greg Marzu for the Knights. League heads, Apsai Coruscant for Tigers. Luminous Kulikefu for the Dolphins. League heads, Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Diecats Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. League heads, Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Luminous Zach Lomax for Eels. Game breakers, Patricia for the Warriors. Luminous Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Red Triumph, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Diecats, Asaya Papalihi for Panthers. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. League heads, Hamoli Olaka'atu for Manly. Luminous Cassie Hiku for the Eels. Bang Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Marky Mark Luminous for the Roosters. Feels like I got something crawling in my shoe. Game breakers, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Die-cuts, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. League heads, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Bang, Apsai Coruscant up. Right team, just not paying attention. Jerome Luai for the Tigers. Luminous Ezra Mam for Broncos. League heads, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Latu Fainu for the Tigers. Game breakers, Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Die Cuts Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Game Breakers Max Plath for the Dolphins. Luminous Cole Flanagan for the Dragons. Daily M Predictor. Fanua Pole. Luminous for the Tigers. 2 packets left for the box. League Heads, Brian Kelly for Titans. Luminous Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Bang Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. Put them to the back, out of our way. League Heads, Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Ali Latua for the Warriors. Game Breakers, Isaiah Yongi for the Eels. Luminous Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. League Heads, Alafiana Kamki Era for Titans. Luminous Jessica Surgis for the Roosters. Die Cuts Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Luminous Mitchell Moses for the Eels. League Heads, Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Harry Grant for Storm. Bang Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous Ronaldo Molisalo for the Sharks. Game Breakers Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Red Triumph, Bronson Sherry for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Zach Labour for the Cowboys. Red Triumph for the Cowboys. Luminous, Sarah Toga Tuki for the Tigers. Die cuts, Greg Marsu for the Knights. Luminous, Connolly Lumi Lou for the Dolphins. League heads, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous, Samuel Stone Street for the Sharks. Game breakers, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Bang, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Gladiators, Luca Moretti for the Eels. Number 173. This is box 11. Almost halfway through it. Luminous, John Bateman for the Cowboys. League heads, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous, Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. Die cuts, Talon May for the Tigers. Luminous, Cameron Munster for Storm. Game breakers, Nita Maynard for the Dragons. Luminous, Brian Kelly for the Titans. Mercury, Kalen Ponga for the Knights, number 110. Luminous, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Luminous, Bailey Simonson for the Eels. League heads, Renato Molitalo for the Sharks. Luminous, Jesse Southwell for the Knights. Die cuts, Connolly Lumi Lou for the Dolphins. Luminous, Luciano Le Lua for the Dragons. League heads, Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous, Katoni Staggs for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Tolatoka Wala for Manly, Luminous Blaze Talagi for Panthers. League Heads, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Luminous Tom Starling for the Raiders. Bang, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Tamika Upton for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Robert Toyer for the Roosters. Luminous Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. League Heads, Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. League Heads, Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ben Trebojevic for Manly. Die cuts, Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Luminous Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Game Breakers, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. Bang, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Luminous Jonah Pezzett for Storm. League Heads, Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Game Breakers, Tuikami Kamika for Storm. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Tolatoka Bang for Manly. Luminous Asaya Papalihi for Panthers. Game Breakers, Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Alex Seafarth for the Tigers. Alright, that was box 11 done and dusted. Last box up is box number 12. Bang, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Loco Pacifici Tonga for the Dragons. Game breakers, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous, Luke Brooks for Manly. Die cuts, Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous, Asai Katoa for Dolphins. League heads, James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Luminous, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Game breakers, Emily Bass for the Tigers. Luminous, Georgia Hale for the Titans. League heads, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous, Josh Kerr for the Dragons. Bang, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Game breakers, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Mitch Kenny for Panthers. League heads, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Mercury, Alafiana Campiera for Titans. Number 407. Luminous, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. League heads, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous, Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Bang, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous, Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Bang, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous, Asaya Papalihi for Panthers. League heads, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous, Jacob Carraz for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Luminous, Alex Seafarth for Tigers. Die cuts, Gahamat Shabarski for the Broncos. Luminous, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Ali Latua for the Warriors. Die cuts Cody Nicarima for the Dolphins. Luminous Zach Labert for the Cowboys. Game breakers Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Jordan Ricky Luminous for Broncos. Gladiators, Alex Seifa for the Tigers, number 98. Jessica Surgis, Luminous for Roosters. League heads, Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Mitchell Moses, Luminous for the Eels. Game breakers, Cameron Munster for Storm. Harry Grant, Luminous for Storm. Bang Jareem Buller for Tigers. Luminous Ronaldo Militalo for Sharks. League heads, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Zach Labert, die cut for the Cowboys. Luminous Connolly Lumi Lou for Dolphins. League heads, Tom Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Samuel Stonestreet for the Sharks. Triumph for the Eels. Luminous Tanila Paseka for Manly. Game breakers, Olivia Higgins for the Knights. Luminous Sam Walker for the Roosters. League heads, Mitch Kenny for Panthers. Luminous John Bateman for the Cowboys. Bang AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Cameron Munster for Storm. Red Triumph, Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous Brian Kelly for Titans. 4 packs left to go. And then we'll go through these hits on the table before having a break. And coming back with the starter case. League heads, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Die cut Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous Jesse Southwell for the Knights. League Heads Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. And lucky last, Game Breakers Billy Smith for the Roosters. Luminous Katoni Staggs for the Broncos. Alright, back to the beginning. We started off with a Dally M Predictor number 157. Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Next up, Dally M Rookie Predictor number 59 for the Broncos. Instant win for the Rabbitohs. Nicholas Verwey, congratulations. Dally M Predictor number 25. AJ Brimson for the Titans. Origin Predictor number 79 for Queensland. Trent LaRoe. Storm. Nicholas Verwey. Not bad, not bad. Alright, next up is the Golden Triumph number 15. Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Orange Stoddart. Alright, lucky last for the case. Number 240, Dally M Predictor, Luke Brooks for Manly. Alright, so as mentioned at the beginning of the video, at this point we will be having a break, so I'll be stopping the video and we will come back with part 2 shortly, and that will be the starters case along with the bonuses, which is the hobby box as well as the sticker album and box combo. So come back, check the comments in the post in the Facebook group. I will post part 2's link there when we're ready to go. Until then, guys, I'll see you all again